At 6, a tough night for the Tories. Big losses for the Conservatives at council elections in England, Wales and Scotland. Labour win the Tory flagship councils of Wandsworth, Barnet and Westminster after decades in Conservative hands, but struggle outside London.
We've had a tough night in some parts of the country, but on the other hand, in other parts of the country, you're still seeing Conservatives going forward and making quite remarkable gains.
And believe you me, this is a big turning point for us. From the depths of 2019, that general election, back on track.
A big night for the Liberal Democrats as they gain more seats than any other party in England. The Greens are doing well too.
Have you heard from Durham Police, Sir Keir?
But Labour's gains are marred by the news that Sir Keir Starmer will now be investigated by Durham Police amid allegations he broke lockdown rules last year. Meanwhile, all eyes on Northern Ireland. Will the Nationalist Party Sinn Féin make history by winning the most votes at Stormont? We'll have the full details on results from Scotland and Wales too, also on the programme. More than 120 years since it was founded, the convenience store McColl's has gone into administration, putting 16,000 jobs at risk. And Prince Harry and Meghan say they will attend the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, but the Queen says they won't be appearing on the Buckingham Palace balcony.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, Rangers make plans for Seville. It's a first European final in 14 years for a team that's come a long way since.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Prime Minister says it's been a tough night for the Conservatives as the party lost hundreds of seats. Labour took some of the Tories' flagship councils in London but made few significant gains elsewhere. But it was a good night all round for the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party. In Scotland, the SNP have once again finished as the biggest party. Labour have come second. The Conservatives suffered heavy losses. It's not looking good for the Conservatives in Wales either, where counting continues as Labour and Plaid Cymru make gains. We'll have more on that in a moment. And the latest from Northern Ireland, where the result could be historic and bring seismic change if Sinn Féin win the most votes. But first, let's look at the results in England. And as you can see, the Conservatives are down by around 300 seats, but they've not all been picked up by Labour. In fact, it's the Liberal Democrats who have won the most new councillors. If local elections had been held everywhere in Britain, this is the BBC's estimate of what the result would have been. Labour as the largest party on 35% and the Conservatives on 30%. Here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, and her report contains some flashing images.
Okay, folks, this is going well.
Trademark optimism, despite shedding councils and losing nearly 400 councillors too. But in the safety of a primary school classroom in his constituency, the Prime Minister didn't seem downcast.
That's very good, that blue margin there you've done. What about some sort of baubles here?
He lost iconic London councils, giving away comfortable Conservative ground.
And what are we going to have when we have the party?
Yet anger at Downing Street parties and his fine for breaking the law
There you go.
did not translate into the catastrophe some Conservatives had feared.
It's mid-term and it's certainly a mixed set of results, and we've had a tough night in some parts of the country, but on the other hand, in other parts of the country, you're still seeing Conservatives going forward and making quite remarkable gains in places that haven't voted Conservative for a long time, or if ever.
Not in London, where his Labour rival had big reasons to smile this morning, winning over territory held by the Tories for decades.
We've just done it! Yes! Westminster! Yes! Wandsworth!
Steps forward, but outside London, perhaps not big, bold strides Labour needs.
This is a massive turning point for the Labour Party. From the depths of 2019, we're back on track now for the general election, showing what the change that we've done, the hard change we've done in the last 2 years, what a difference it has made.
Have you heard from Durham Police, Sir Keir? Any comment on their investigation?
Yet as he travelled to celebrate success elsewhere, allegations over lockdown chased the Labour leader. Durham police will now investigate claims that Keir Starmer broke the rules, having beer and curry with colleagues during lockdown.
Anything to say about the investigation, Sir Keir? Have you heard from Durham police?
He's always said nothing went wrong, but they are questions Keir Starmer will have to answer. Voters' response to the Lib Dems was warm in many places, grabbing seats from Labour in the northern city Hull, from the Tories in Kent's Tunbridge Wells, Somerset and pockets of affluent London. The message to the Tories from some green suburbs will cause Tory nerves.
They're saying they've had enough of this Prime Minister. And I think the tectonic plates of British politics are shifting. And now it's up to Conservative MPs to shove the Prime Minister into the abyss.
Remember, your votes stitch together a giant patchwork, not a picture that's the same in every corner of the country.
You're my mum's counsellor, yeah?
There was striking Labour success in London that will hurt for the Tories, who broadly fell back further in the south than in the north of England, their coalition fraying more at its traditional end. But Labour's jubilation in the capital wasn't always matched by enthusiasm elsewhere. The Greens picking up pace too, with dozens of gains. But while results in England perhaps confirmed much of the status quo, the scene is set for a genuine moment of change in Northern Ireland. Look at this. For the first time, voters seem poised to make Sinn Féin the biggest party. That would be a moment of history and a moment of challenge and uncertainty for the UK.
I'm very grateful for all those people that came out and engaged in what was a very positive campaign.
Leaders whose dream is leaving the Union for a united Ireland would be in charge. Yay! And that could also shift the political conversation in Scotland, where the SNP, who also want to leave the UK, continue their years of dominance. Crucially, Labour moves up into second place. The Scottish Tories in a slump. And grew in Wales too, the biggest party profiting at the expense of the Tories.
Yet, spin back a few weeks, many Tories in there feared a complete calamity. They've had a terrible time in some parts of the country, but this hasn't been a wipeout. And Labour has moved forward, but not far or fast enough to be sure of power. Remember, these elections give us clues, not concrete convictions of what's coming next. But it seems the two big parties are somehow locked in an uncomfortable status quo.
That is very good.
No dramatic breakthrough for his main rival, no total breakdown for the Conservatives. Boris Johnson has taken knocks today, but still stands to carry on. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's go to Durham now and our North of England correspondent Danny Savage. So the news this afternoon, Danny, that Sir Keir Starmer is now being investigated over allegations of breaking lockdown rules.
Yes, Sophie, this all dates back to the 30th of April last year, and the question is, did Sir Keir Starmer break lockdown rules when he was during a visit to Durham here when he drank beer in a local MP's office? The Conservative press over the last few days has dubbed this Beergate and is calling for more detail. The Labour Party insists no rules were broken by Sir Keir, and Sir Keir himself has made this statement in the last half hour outside Labour HQ in London.
As I've explained a number of times, we were working in the office, we stopped for something to eat, no party, no breach of the rules. The police obviously have got their job to do, we should let them get on with it, but I'm confident that no rules were broken. Meanwhile, we've had a really good set of results today.
and an assessment by the officers here at Durham Police Headquarters earlier this year did conclude that no offences had been committed and therefore no further action was taken. But following what they described today as receipt of significant new information, they have now reopened that investigation. What were the rules on the 30th of April last year? Well, gathering indoors with people from outside your household or support group was banned under the law, but there was an exemption for work purposes. The question for police is whether Labour officials eating and drinking together was legal under work purposes, and was having a beer a problem when it comes to those rules. That investigation is now underway. Watch this space, Sophie.
Danny Savage, thank you. Well, our political editor Laura Kunsberg is in Westminster, so clearly challenges ahead for both Labour and the Conservatives.
That's right, Sophie. And first of all, you know, the health warning. Local elections are not general elections. They are complicated. They happen in all sorts of different ways in different parts of the UK. So we have to be careful not to make too many assumptions and not to read too much into what millions of voters told politicians when they went to the ballot box on Thursday. That said, they do give us really vital clues about the state of the tug of war between the two big parties who vie for Downing Street. And I think that there are actually risks to both of them from what's happened in the last 24 hours. First off, as Danny was explaining there, I think this investigation now being carried out into Keir Starmer's behaviour at that event during lockdown does present a potential very big jeopardy for him. He knows that many members of the public were driven absolutely to crazy by what happened in Downing Street, and as the events during lockdown emerged and were reported, he used that time after time as part of a political attack on the Prime Minister, calling for him to resign when he was investigated by the police, and calling for him to resign again when he received his fine. Now, if Keir Starmer finds himself in that position, well, it's really quite hard to see how he wouldn't have to follow his own advice. But he says he's confident he's done nothing wrong, and we've got no idea where that investigation will lead. There is, though, also a risk for the Conservatives, no question about that. Now, these are a bad set of results for the governing party, but not a dreadful set of results. And some insiders would say, actually, for a party that's been in power for more than a decade, actually, they're not too shabby at all. But with all that concern among the public about making ends meet, with some anger still about what's been going on in Downing Street, I think there is a risk for Boris Johnson and his team about being complacent and thinking, well, it wasn't too bad. Maybe we don't have to change that much at all. And there are still people in his own party who really believe that Boris Johnson has to shape up if he's to lead them into the next election.
Our political editor Laura Kunsberg, thank you. The SNP has emerged as the winner from the local elections in Scotland, returning the highest number of councillors again. The Labour Party has recovered some of the ground it lost in 2017, retaking second place from the Conservatives. The Scottish Conservative leader, Douglas Ross, blamed so-called Partygate for the losses suffered. Here's our Scotland editor, James Cook.
15 years ago this week, the SNP swept to power in Scotland. And Nicola Sturgeon's party is still going strong. It remains, by some distance, the biggest force in local government here.
We've increased our share of the vote. We've increased the number of councillors that we have returned. We're the largest party in more councils, I think, today than we were yesterday. So this is an astonishing result for the SNP and an absolutely brutal rejection of Boris Johnson and the Conservatives.
But Labour are also pretty pleased with their performance. 5 years ago, they were pushed into third place by the Conservatives, a humiliation for a party which was once the dominant force in Scottish politics.
Look, it's a good day for the Scottish Labour Party. After almost a decade, we are seeing Labour firmly back on the pitch. We are making gains across the country, firmly in a good, strong second place. But let me be very clear to people across Scotland. I don't aspire for the Labour Party to be in second place.
The Scottish Conservative leader, though, is seeking shelter from the storm. He had called for Boris Johnson to resign before changing his mind when Russia invaded Ukraine. But he's still trying to pin the blame for a poor performance on number 10.
The public have been very clear. They have sent a message here in Scotland and across the United Kingdom that they are not happy with the Prime Minister, they are not happy with Partygate, and as I say, many of them just stayed at home on Thursday. It's not that they've switched to other parties, they just didn't come out to vote, and we as a party across the United Kingdom have to look at that.
So Labour have made gains in Scotland, but the party remains a distant second to the SNP in a country which remains deeply divided on the question which Nicola Sturgeon insists remains her key aim: independence. James Cook, BBC News, Glasgow.
Votes are still being counted for the Northern Ireland Assembly. The elections decide who will become the largest party at Stormont. As it stands, the nationalist Sinn Féin may well make history by winning the most seats. Let's go to our correspondent Emma Vardy. How's it looking?
Well, as you say, the big question in this election has been whether Sinn Féin, the party that wants to create a united Ireland, can beat their bitter rivals, the Democratic Unionist Party, by winning more seats. At the moment, Sinn Féin are ahead. So far, so good for them, but there is still a way to go before we know the final results. What we are seeing is that the DUP has been losing some of its votes to the harder line TUV. Now, both parties detest the new Brexit arrangements. They want to scrap the new Irish Sea border, but this has created difficulties for unionism and it has split the vote. Now, just a few minutes ago, we saw the leaders of Sinn Féin arriving here at the Count Centre in a big press scrum to big cheers. And of course, if Sinn Féin were to win this election, if they were to become the largest party, it would be a historic result and Michelle O'Neill would be entitled to claim the First Minister role of Northern Ireland. But of course, going into this election, there was a pretty gloomy outlook as to whether there would be a functioning government after this election. Nothing has changed on that front. Voters still appear to be in for months of uncertainty.
Emma Vardy, thank you. In Wales, Labour and Plaid Cymru made gains at the expense of Tory and independent councillors. Labour have made the biggest gains, increasing the number of councils under their control. The Welsh Conservatives have lost control of Monmouthshire, the only council they held in Wales. It's the first time since 1995 that Labour will have the largest group on the Welsh Authority. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith has this report.
Steeped in Labour history, the South Wales Valley's relationship with the party has wavered in recent years. But today, vows were renewed. Voters who may have flirted with other parties have returned to the fold.
It's real and undeniable progress. And if you think about the low point that we'd reached in 2019, it often takes a long way back to regain people's trust to consider you and then to vote for you. It's about building on the progress we've made to date, both in Wales but in other parts of the UK too.
While only a few councils have changed hands, Labour has picked up the most seats. The Welsh Conservatives are the one who've paid the price for national issues like Partygate.
Wherever you went, that national message was the message that was coming across on the doorsteps, that sadly was hitting home and was detrimental to local campaigning that was going on by our candidates.
For Plaid Cymru, this election was a difficult path to tread. Tied into a deal with Labour in the Senedd, some thought their message would be muted, but they've claimed an extra council and have come out of it stronger.
When people are looking at the state of politics in Westminster at the moment, they see this kind of cooperative politics in Wales, where, you know, a total contrast from the sort of aggressive adversarialism of Westminster as refreshingly different.
While some taste success, the picture is still mixed for most of Wales. Here in Merthyr Tydfil, like most councils, no one party is in overall control. And so there may be weeks of negotiations before everything is settled. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, Merthyr Tydfil.
Well, most of the results in England, Wales and Scotland are now in. Here's Rita Chakrabarti on what the numbers show so far.
This is the state of the parties in the English council elections, with almost all of the councils declared, and it shows what has shaped up to be a bad night for the Conservatives and a particularly good night for the Liberal Democrats. Let me show you some of the actual council results as they've come in. These are some of the most notable ones. The two in London, Westminster and Wandsworth, very totemic councils in the past for the Conservatives. They are very notable Labour gains. These are two boroughs that have been Conservative for decades and decades, so a big psychological boost for Labour there in London. Labour has also gained Worthing in West Sussex, and that's a council where they've been making advances at the Conservatives' expense for several years. It's a Labour gain. And Labour has also gained Blaenau Gwent in South Wales. That is from independence. The Conservatives, I was saying, a bad night for them. They've lost control of West Oxfordshire, which is where David Cameron had his Westminster seat. They've lost control of Huntingdonshire, which is where John Major had his Westminster seat. Those are now 2 hung councils. Dundee in Scotland, that is an SNP gain, and the SNP are on top of the poll. They remain preeminent in Scotland. And the Liberal Democrats, as I said, a good night for them, and they have gained the newly created Council of Somerset. If you are wondering what's going on in your own local authority, do go to our website and you can go to our postcode checker. Just put your postcode in and click on the area. You can do that, as I say, from the website or visit the BBC News app.
Rita Chakrabarti there. The time is 6:20. Our top story this evening. A tough night for the Tories. Big losses for the Conservatives at council elections in England, Wales and Scotland. And the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, Prince Harry and Meghan, along with Prince Andrew, won't appear on the balcony at Buckingham Palace next month.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, named Test captain last week, this week hitting a record-breaking century in his first innings since. Ben Stokes scores 161 off just 88 balls for Durham.
It all started more than 120 years ago in Glasgow when the legendary Scottish footballer Robert Smith-McColl decided to use some of his earnings to open 3 sweet shops in the city. They were called R.S. McColl. The business took off and expanded over the decades as McColl's became convenience stores all over the UK. But now McColl's says it's appointing administrators, putting 16,000 jobs at risk. And tonight there is hope of a rescue deal, as our business correspondent Emma Simpson reports.
From its first shop in Glasgow in 1901 to a network of more than 1,000 stores, McColl's is a familiar name on our high streets. Shopping locally has never been more popular than during the pandemic, but McColl's has found the going tough. Here in Stevenage, shoppers say it's handy, but don't buy very much.
I just get my newspapers here, and I just like them because they're available. You know, they're always regular.
We're just heading in now to see, get a birthday card and a drink.
A quick grab and go?
Yes.
Good service. Not always got what you want.
Even before COVID, convenience stores have been a bright spot here on the high street, but McColl's has been too slow to adapt in providing more of a one-stop shop. It's also had long-running supply chain problems, struggling to get stock. A business with too much debt, finding it harder and harder to make money. Morrison's, already in a partnership with McColl's, put in an offer for the chain overnight. But it's the owners of this vast petrol station group, the billionaire Issa brothers, who now look set to buy the business.
The underlying business at McColl's is over 1,000 convenience stores in pretty decent locations. And really now, in the future, it's just a question of getting the range right and the pricing right to see the business flourish well into the future.
McColl's staff were told today that going into administration would hopefully mean that the business and colleagues would transfer across to a new owner. A deal could be done by Monday. Emma Simpson, BBC News, Stevenage.
A teenager has been jailed for 6.5 years for the manslaughter of 14-year-old Dear-John Reid in Birmingham last year after being cleared of murder last month. A victim impact statement read out in court on behalf of Dear-John's mother said her son had been chased down by a lynch mob before he was stabbed in the heart. There have been further cases of salmonella poisoning in Kinder products. The UK Health Security Agency says it's now investigating 101 cases, the majority in children under the age of 5. Shops stocking certain Kinder chocolate products have been urged to remove them immediately. A Kinder factory in Belgium was closed last month when it was linked to dozens of cases. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have announced they will be attending celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee next month with their children, but the Queen has decided that Prince Harry and Meghan, along with Prince Andrew, won't be allowed to appear on the balcony at Buckingham Palace during Trooping the Colour. The Palace also says it won't be confirmed until much nearer the time which of the events the Queen will attend. Here's our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell.
An appearance on the palace balcony is a centrepiece of any major royal celebration, but for the Platinum Jubilee there are sensitivities around some family members. So the Queen has decided that only working royals will join her on the balcony. So, cancelled in balcony terms are the Duke of York and the Sussexes. Harry and Meghan say they are coming to the Jubilee, but they won't be on the balcony. The big question, of course, is how visible will the Queen be throughout the 4 days of the Jubilee celebrations? It all begins on Thursday, the 2nd of June, with Trooping the Colour, at the culmination of which the royal family makes that balcony appearance. According to the palace, the Queen plans to attend Trooping, but a final decision will be taken on the day. On Friday the 3rd of June, there will be a service of thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral. Again, all the palace will say is that the Queen plans to attend. On Saturday the 4th of June, after the Derby, there will be the Platinum Party at the palace, produced by the BBC, on a stage being built right in front of the palace. Will the Queen be there? It will be decided on the day. And then finally, on Sunday the 5th of June, the Gold State Coach will be one of the main features in a Jubilee pageant on the Mall, though the Queen will not be riding in it. So it is clearly the Queen's intention to be at Trooping the Colour and the service of thanksgiving, and at the other events if she can. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Let's go back to our main story in the election results, and we now have the verdict of many of the voters who cast their ballots yesterday. The Conservatives have been punished in parts of England, the Lib Dems have had several successes, and Labour say their results mark a turning point. Our political correspondent Ben Wright has been speaking to voters.
The party's also won Westminster for the first time ever, but gains outside of London are not being seen.
In the south of England, signs of Tory discomfort. Southampton Council has flipped back to Labour control. And even while Stuart Humby voted Conservative yesterday, there's one issue on everyone's minds.
With the last couple of months and all the energy prices coming in and the bills, I think everywhere is going to struggle. You know, basically small businesses.
This is a ward that now has a Labour councillor for the first time in decades, a clear reversal of Conservative fortunes.
The cost of living is pushing us to the breadline. You know, I've got a business to support, a home to support, and the bills are just going up. So I've got two lots of bills to pay. I've got my bills here to pay, I've got my bills at home to pay, everything's going up.
At the cocktail bar he runs with his wife Dorothy, Prince Obuji told me why he had changed his vote.
We need something that will help this industry to survive at this time. It's very urgent.
So you've switched from the Conservatives to Labour in these local elections. I wonder how much the Partygate saga was part of your thinking.
It did. It was part of it. It all added up. And, you know, in all honesty, we had to vote Labour this time, yeah.
Southampton has always been seen as a political weather vane, a South Coast battleground between Labour and the Tories. After only a year in charge, the Conservatives have been swiftly ejected here, and it's Sir Keir Starmer's activists who are beaming today. Further east along the coast, Labour also took control of Worthing and Crawley, but the biggest political ripples in this part of England were felt in Somerset.
Well done! I wasn't expecting that.
Winning a council that had been run by the Conservatives for the last 13 years.
I think people have just had enough of all the duplicity, and it's about time, really. I'm delighted, absolutely delighted.
I think it does send a message to central government that local people want to feel empowered and supported.
The Lib Dems gained seats across southern Tory heartlands, as well as taking Hull from Labour in the north of England, which is where the Conservatives mostly held off Labour's challenge in places like Hartlepool, where voters didn't seem too fussed about Downing Street parties.
Things will go on no matter what happens, you know what I mean? You'll get people doing things which they shouldn't do, but what they want to do is put it back to the back burner and let's move on.
Either Labour or Conservative, whoever, everybody do silly things.
Local elections are not a simple reflection of national politics, but they give parties a lot to think about. Labour's making progress but has a long way to go back to power, while the Conservatives will be concerned their vote in parts of true blue England seems to be sinking. Ben Wright, BBC News, Southampton.
Time now for a look at the weather. Helen Willits is here. Some blue sky ahead.
Certainly is for some of us, Sophie. Not a heat wave, but we're going to have some pleasant weather, mostly dry weather. Now today we did have blue skies across many southern areas. It wasn't as an abundant today, the sunshine as yesterday, but we managed 23 degrees Celsius in just a few spots. But look at the difference further north. We're having some much needed rainfall across parts of Wales. It's been raining through Northern Ireland, across Northern England. It's cleared from Scotland and Northern Ireland more recently for Northern Ireland, and it will push further south. Now whether we see any significant or appreciable rain across the gardens in the south is a bit of a question mark, but I think enough to dampen the ground and keep it mild, of course. Although in the north and glens of Scotland we might just get cold enough for a touch of frost. Now the weekend, as we were just hinting at, Sophie and I, looking mostly dry and fine. There'll be some sunshine. There'll still be a few showers around. The remnants really of that weather front hanging around across East Anglia and the southeast. Might also just see 1 or 2 showers from this thicker cloud for the northeast of England, but I think the west will be best for sunshine. We can't rule out the odd shower, an isolated shower just about anywhere tomorrow, but you can see it looks mostly dry and fine. And when the sun comes out, we'll see temperatures into the high teens. We may squeeze a 20 tomorrow. I think it will be a little bit cooler though for the east of Scotland and the northeast of England with an onshore breeze. That all switches again on Sunday as that high pressure across us nudges a little bit further eastwards, allowing the progress of these weather fronts to come in off the Atlantic. So I think rather more cloud by the end of play for Northern Ireland and for Scotland, but a lot of dry weather. And after some mist and fog both tomorrow morning and Sunday morning, when the sun comes out, we'll really feel it. It's strong sunshine, high UV at this time of year, of course high levels of pollen as well. But you can see a little less cold for the northeast coast on Sunday. As for into next week, looking distinctly unsettled, particularly in the north, but we may see a little bit of rain in the south before things warm up a little later next weekend. Not this one, the one after.
Always promising. Helen, thank you. And that's all from the BBC News at 6. So it's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.